Everyone. Welcome to Fail Forward Live. My name is Michelle Reguse McBean, and I am delighted to have our guest today. Jess Warrington is the leader for and general manager for CloudBlue for Ingram Micro. He is in charge of their entire sales, pre-sales team for North America, as well as their go-to market strategy in the region. And CloudBlue partners with some of the world's most leading organizations like T-Mobile, CDW, Lenovo, Telstra, just to name a few. Jess, I'm delighted you can join us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. Super excited to be here and speak again.
Awesome. So for anyone who doesn't know CloudBlue or Ingram, they're living under a rock somewhere. Can you please let them know who you are and what you do as a company?
Absolutely. So CloudBlue is a business unit within Ingram Micro. Ingram Micro is the world's largest IT distributor. CloudBlue is a independent enterprise software business unit. And basically what we do is we connect IP owners of all types with go-to-market ecosystems. So some of the names that you just mentioned, when you think of those extremely large telecom operators, they are in the business of building their own marketplace, creating a digital economy or digital transformation for their end customers. CloudBlue is the software engine that enables them to do that. So our goal is to create many-to-many, integration between different types of IP and routes to market.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, you are one of the best in class. I hear nothing but great things about your innovation and your partnership and distribution strategy across the board. So I'm delighted to have you. And I love having partner-led organizations and inspirational leaders. And for those of you listening who have never heard our podcast before, the premise is this. We want to interview successful leaders like yourself and talk about your strategy and your journey to the top. And sometimes, we often see people that share their successes and their awards, but we miss the stumbling blocks and the things that really teach us lessons along the way. So you can think of this as a mentorship podcast that allows people to learn, listen, and be inspired. So as we go through this journey, you've been in the technology channel ecosystem, was it 15 years globally? And did you know that you always wanted to work in tech?
No, that's the short answer. I think a bit of an interesting journey. So when I graduated college in June of 01, in biology and physics. So throughout the course of my educational experience, I always was pointed toward medicine or biotech. And I went to school in San Diego, which is a hotbed for those two industries. I took a couple of months off after graduating college and then started my first job search. Soon after 9/11 happened. So I was looking in biotech in different lab jobs and to see if I could get into a science-based industry. But then everything sort of changed with the economy. And I had a couple of friends that had gotten into sales up in Santa Barbara, and they were doing pretty well at a young age in tech sales. So the best way to find my first professional job was a referral from one of my friends who had started in a tech sales position, and that's how I got into it. And then, close to 20 years later, here we are.
Wow. So out of curiosity, what was your very first job and what did it teach you?
My very first job there was a recreation district in the neighborhood that I grew up. So there was a pool and tennis and that type of thing. So sort of a country club, but more toned down than that. So my first job was maintenance on those grounds and then lifeguarding in the afternoon.
Pretty fun.
The two the two things that I took from that, one on the maintenance side, I learned that I had to roll up my sleeves and work hard. It was a very difficult, it was physically demanding, I would say, to keep, sort of everything in a presentable way so that people would enjoy their time on the property. And then on the lifeguarding piece of it, it's a lot of responsibility, right? People on the outside of lifeguarding just look at someone potentially just sitting there enjoying the sun, and but there's a lot of young kids, there's a lot of families that are entrusting that you're keeping a watchful eye, and it would be interesting to have a heart rate monitor on a lifeguard through the course of the day when you see young kids come in. But sort of there's a lot of responsibility to it, and so sort of taking ownership of that responsibility is something that carried me through my early professional career, and certainly now is ownership of what I have to do and what I have to get done.
I love that. And you are also a father, I learned recently. So you have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old. And what were their names again? Sloan?
Yeah, two girls. Yeah, the Sloan is just about to turn 10 in July, and Paige turned 5 in May.
Awesome. That's great. I'm a May birthday also, and I have 2 girls of my own. We have Brooklyn and Callie, 7 and 5. So we are thankful for lifeguards as well, but they're little mermaids now. So they do a lot of swimming and living in sunny Florida. So that's a good problem to
Awesome.
have during a pandemic. um,
Definitely.
so now I'm curious, did you ever end up joining the country club that you maintained? Did you ever get a membership there?
No, I spend a lot of time there, so I feel like it, but that was in Northern California where I grew up. So I grew up in Portola Valley, which is just next to Menlo Park and Palo Alto. No one had ever heard of it, those areas. Well, maybe Palo Alto from Stanford, but when I was growing up, they were little enclaves in the Bay Area. Now everyone knows because of the big tech companies that call those places home, and the VCs and everyone else. But
Yeah.
since college, I moved to Southern California. So I go back up there or pre-COVID, I'd go back up there maybe once a month for work. But I've planted my roots in Southern California.
Oh, I love it there too. It's one of my favorite places in the world. So it's a good place to live. And whenever you make it back, you just have to tell the maintenance workers that you were the one that started there.
That's right. Right. I've earned my stripes there. Yeah, exactly.
The grass was much better when I was here.
That's right. That's right.
So my question to you is this: if you had to look back at young Jess at 21 years old, right, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, about to embark on life's adventures, what advice would you give him looking back now?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's advice that I probably received at the time, and then maybe didn't take it. But looking back, maybe I should. But I think for me, and I've gone more this direction as my career has progressed. But I think it's write it down, write down, what your, I have a personal mission statement that's just professional, but across my life that encompasses, how I operate, making sure the activities that I'm doing are aligned with, sort of the direction that I want my life to head. And then from under that, writing down your goals and then plans to achieve those goals. I think
Mm.
for me, the mission statement doesn't change, our business has a mission statement. Some of the great companies I've worked for in my past, they all have a very clear mission on what they're trying to do. With their business, I think the same for every person. If you can be very clear about where you're trying to go and how you're going to get there, it enables you to measure sort of day to day and not get stuck in the grind per se. I mean, I can confidently say that I've never deviated from my mission. It maybe have changed a little bit as I've gotten older and now have a family, and the priorities change a bit. But my goals and my plan, change a lot, right? And the way to manage that change, like that change plans, depending on how big. I mean, some plans are very strategic, some are tactical, but I'm very open to revisiting those and pivoting as needed, but always making sure that it's towards sort of that North Star.
What was your mission, if you had to ask, or what was your goal?
Yeah, so if I look at the highest level, not just that, professionally, but I think there's sort of 4 aspects that I look at in my life, I guess. One is, sort of my personal life. So my family, my friends, everything that sort of is day to day, non-work related, and making sure that I'm, cultivating that and giving it enough time and energy. to keep that as healthy as possible. Two is my professional life, making sure that business, our CloudBlue business in North America is growing and as healthy as we can make it against our, business goals. The other two components to that I think, probably a little bit different for everyone, but is around sort of physical and mental health, making sure you're maintaining yourself. So different than sort of that personal aspect, which are your relationships, but making sure you're maintaining yourself. And then the fourth piece of the puzzle for me would be like making sure you're spiritually centered, and that can be different for other people. For some people, it's religion. For other people, it's yoga or meditation or whatever, but making sure sort of you have yourself, your proportions are accurate. If you put too much weight into, and it can be a little bit different for everyone, but if you put too much weight in your work and you start to lose on your personal relationships or your health, I feel like that's what I look at, to making sure those levels across the four pillars of it are in a healthy spot for me.
I love that. I love that concept so much. And I think that, being present and being mindful and self care, all these things, I think if the pandemic did anything, it gave people the opportunity to pause and rethink, what are my priorities? What are my personal, professional goals? Am I doing the right things? Am I on the right path? And what really matters in my life, right? So there's this sense of creating, and I love those four. I love the balance. And this question comes up for women all the time, and I don't think it's a woman question because I think everyone has balance. But do you think that you can have work-life balance, or is it sort of an integration or scales that ebb and flow?
I think it's an ebb and flow, right? It's not every day or every hour. It's partitioned out so that you're balanced.
Right.
There are times when I feel like I'm working 27 hours a day, but I think it is extremely important to be selfish about that time, and making sure that you're giving the right energy across your life, because you're, it's sort of like in business, we like, or that CloudBlue or other software companies I've worked for or with, you can get into technical debt, right? You're going too fast from a business perspective, and then you have to pay it back by re-engineering your platforms or your technology in order to catch up and then proceed with your business. Life's sort of the same way. You can go gas pedal down on work and burn out, but then eventually you're going to have to catch up and start to pay off those other factors as well.
That's very insightful. I think that's really intriguing. And this was a question I would ask later on, but I'm going to ask it now since you brought it up. What are the personal things you do, whether it's physically or books you read or TED Talks or podcasts or Audible, that really like light you up and inspire you or center you? Are there any particular things that you find advantageous in your journey?
Yeah, it's a good question. Most critical for me is getting outside every morning, and sometimes that happens really early, depending on how the work schedule is. But giving myself at least 30 or 30 to 60 minutes of unplugged time outside. Usually, I'm running around the neighborhood or doing something just to allow for my mind to reset or plan to go into the day. I've figured, and it's been more important since COVID started. I live about 30 miles south of Ingram Micro headquarters. So in normal times, I'd drive into the office and I'd have 45 minutes or so not looking at my phone. It's commuting time, but my brain would sort of get in a place where it was ready to take on the day by the time I landed in the office. Now it's outdoors, in order to sort of recharge, calibrate what I took in from the day before, get ready for what's coming up, so I'm not landing into meeting number one just blind and trying to figure out where I'm going. So getting outside and getting moving is important for me. I think 1A to that is carving out time to podcasts, or read and just take in sort of outside information. I grew up playing sports. I played baseball through college, so I think there's so many metaphors from sports in the business world. So one of the podcasts that I've started listening to, and being Southern Californian, Jim Rome has a sports talk show that's very popular, but he just released a podcast that's called The Reinvention Project. And he's certainly been very successful in that industry. But I'd say he's probably late in his career. He's been on the radio for a long time, but the Reinvention Project is, him trying to figure out how to reinvent himself by talking to people that have done it and motivate, and how do you get inspired to move forward even when you've had a level of success. So that's one that's been super interesting and inspiring that's come up over the last couple of months. From a book perspective, I really like the Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is from Ben Horowitz. It's actually over my right or left shoulder over there, right shoulder, maybe left on the screen. One of the things that I love about that book is if I boil everything down, it's talking about you need to make decisions. You have to make decisions fast, and then you have to stand behind it and move forward, right? You can't, if the decision is easy, anyone can make the decision. It's when there's a hard decision, you have to make it. Sitting in a land of maybe is the killer. It's a killer in business. It's a killer with our partners and with our customers.
Right.
So yeah, that's a good one as well.
Those are great. I'm going to have to check out some of those books as well. And I'm a big fan of, especially during the pandemic, outdoor. I used to say I don't run unless something is chasing me, but now I've taken up running. And you're the third Californian I've spoken to that runs outside every morning to start their day, sometimes on the beach. So I'm a little jealous. I'm going to have to drive half an hour to Florida's beaches, but I'll do it because it sounds like a great way to start your day and really have all those endorphins and focus and center yourself before you kind of hit the world. So I love that idea. Now,
I heard once. Sorry, I heard someone say. I can't remember who said it. It's probably 10 years ago now. The best thing about running to start the day is you'll have everything you do for the rest of the day will be easier than that. You've already done your hardest thing. And that kind of there's a therapy to it.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I do believe in the runner's high. I thought that was a myth, but I really do. I feel better, I feel happier, I feel more focused, all of those things. So all advantageous. And I also bought a Peloton recently. So that's been my guilty pleasure. You could get half an hour in at any time and call it a day. And those people are like motivational speakers. They're like, leave it all. So I enjoy
Incredible business model too.
Yes, absolutely. All about customer experience, much like yourself.
Yep.
So now this is the thing, right? You have reached sort of one of the highest levels at one of the largest global companies in the world. What would you say is the biggest myth about your role that you would want to debunk for our audience?
It's funny. I think maybe 2 years ago, I was meeting with a client outside of Toronto, and we were sitting down over a meal, and I think she asked, she's like, "What's your dream job?" And which was kind of a strange question from a client, but it was a funny one. And my response was, "My dream job is the job that my wife thinks I have." so the myth, I think the myth is that sort of building an ecosystem of partners, and especially the large scale customers that we deal with or we work with at CloudBlue and enabling their business, that it's just handshakes and smiles and steak and rounds of golf and that type of thing. And it is absolutely not that. Well, especially over the last year and a half. But there is a very specific science to building a channel, building a partner ecosystem, enabling those customers to be successful, that needs to be approached with a heavy emphasis on the process. It's not just something that happens because a couple of people at the executive level know each other and think we can make something happen. It takes teams for big organizations to come together in order to create business success. So the myth probably is that it's sort of easy, whether it's sales or channel building. I think it's probably, there's a lot more to it than probably people think before they're living it.
Absolutely. I have this joke though, because there was one time that I had and Jay, my husband, Jay McBain, and I both traveled a lot for work at different portions of our career. But when we had young children, I opted to stay home more often and he traveled more often. And he called me one night and he got picked up in a limo and he went to the Ritz-Carlton and he had filet and lobster. And I think I was eating a cold chicken nugget with a child that threw up on me. And I was like, tell me about your day, dear. So I'm with your wife. I'm
Right,
with your
right.
wife on that one. But no, absolutely. It is, it's always wrong with challenges. And I believe it's all about relationships. So I'm curious, and this wasn't a question I pre-planned or asked you, but what would you say was the way that you overcame the challenges of the last year, not being able to be face to face with a lot of your customers and prospects? How do you maintain that relationship?
Yeah, it's a good question. Looking back, what I think about that now versus what I thought about it a year ago is probably quite a bit different. Um, the way that One of the things that's happened in the market, it's changing a little bit now, but all of our competitors and ourselves and our partners are all in the same boat, right? It's a
Mm,
very linear or binary process, right? We're all a Teams or a Zoom or a WebEx call. You get on a call, you talk about how annoyed you are with the platform that you're using for a couple minutes. No offense to those providers, but and then you have your 25 minutes on the call. Maybe 6 months ago we would talk about how we're COVID for 5 minutes, and then it's a 20-minute call in and out, and then our customers and our partners are on to the next one with another vendor, with another partner, and there's a cycle to it, and we live it too. That there's no sort of leg up. So
mm,
the team and I have been talking about it for the last year. It's how do we create that connection with our customers and partners that we used to get over a cup of coffee, understanding about their family, what motivates them. How do we work together to achieve common goals? There's less one-on-one conversation. So I think it's more groups from both companies coming together on a medium, like this, where it's very formal or professional. It's structured.
right.
So the way that we've been successful overcoming that is one-on-one,
Mm,
one-on-one with customers and partners. It's still virtual meetings, but it enables you to get more candid conversation, and across levels of the organization. We'll do it at the executive level, executive to executive, but at the director manager level, and then the day-to-day work. We'll create those connections as broadly as we can one-on-one. It's been the best way we've had to mitigate against COVID.
That's fantastic. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that, I use the adage, people buy from people they like. It's an old adage, but it's a true one, right? And if you don't let people in and get to, if you're always in big formal group settings, you miss, a lot of the steak dinners and the golf or the hotel lobby bar after the conference is really just the talking and getting to know each
Yeah,
other, and understanding, what your pain points are, how you can solve them, how you can help each other succeed together. So yeah, absolutely. I think some of the best conversations, and I learned that very early on in my career. I had a global business study abroad in Italy, and the woman that taught the course actually worked at KPMG, and she said that she never went to a bar after work. And then she would go in the next day and everyone would be having a meeting discussion. And she'd be like, did we talk about that in the meeting yesterday? I don't recall talking about any of that. And then she realized that after work, they all went out to the local restaurant bar. She always declined. And that's where the real conversations happened. So trying to put that in
100%.
a social way or a one-on-one way, I think is ideal and key because you miss out on those opportunities otherwise. That's a great point. So
100%.
I would be remiss not to ask you the ideal goal of this conversation. What was your biggest failure, personally or professionally, and what did it teach you and why?
Yeah, I think so. When I look back sort of at life and professionally, I have a hard time sort of picking out failures or successes. right? There's certainly been a ton of both. I think it's sort of a constant, we talk the ebbs and flows of both. If I, sort of course through it, I've always had a plan. Like I was saying earlier, I had a plan to go into medicine, then into biotech, and then that plan changed. I'd say, going back to when I was in school, I grew up just out, a bike's ride from Stanford. So my plan was to go to Stanford. I didn't get into Stanford, so failure one. Right? Then I decided that UCLA was going to be where I was going to go. I got in, so I went down there. I visited, but I decided that I wanted to play baseball. So no play. Let's kill that plan and go to UCSD, where it ended up being a great school for me. I got to play baseball. I met my would-be wife, and sort of new plan there. So if I look back and say, where were the failures professionally? I've had two positions earlier in my career that where it's sort of in the 6-month range or less. So, if I look back on those and say, did I fail the company? Did the company fail me? Or did it just not work? I don't like the failure label per se, because that indicates that, there was, it's probably the right label, right? But I guess my mind is saying it wasn't a failure. It was a learning experience. One of those was a startup. It was about a 10 to 15 person company up in Los Angeles. We spent 6 months sort of vetting the process, them vetting me vetting them, and then it only lasted for about 6 months. And so that, what I learned is it just wasn't the right. My oldest daughter was just born. I needed something more stable at the time. I was able to deliver results for them, but it just wasn't the right fit. So yeah, I mean, if I look back on it, that was a failure. I wish I could have made it work for them, because they had to, there's, in a startup environment, they don't have a lot of resources to spend 6 months, sort of vetting out a new member of the team, and then invest in onboarding and training and everything else, and it doesn't work. But I quickly, I move on. That company is successful. I've had success since then. I think it's just sort of a constant, management about what I was talking about earlier. Like, have a plan, but if the plan doesn't work, quick decision onto new plan. And I mean, I can honestly say there's not been a point of failure where I've said I have not taken more from it than what I've lost. So I don't have the big glamorous answer, but there's failures throughout every month, throughout the year. Some smaller, some larger. But I think if you're focused on the journey and that mission statement, each success and each failure isn't quite as extreme. One of my first bosses, actually maybe my first boss in my first professional job, not the lifeguard, but when we would lose deals, he'd say, "There's always business tomorrow." And so I never, it guided sort of where I got. I never got too high or too low. We've had some great wins, and it's, that excitement gets quickly, lessened by now having to execute and deliver for your client, right? So if you can keep sort of a steady growth pattern, I think that's the best way to deal with it. So from every failure, there's, what can you take from that to grow for yourself? And if there's anything you need to give back from the organization that it didn't work, I'd say that would be the other point. Every connection that you make, every relationship that, across your professional career is very likely to come back at another point in your professional career, whether there's a customer or a client, or you're working together again, your colleagues. The world is small, especially now, right? We're very connected globally. So learn and keep those connections, strong. There's burnt bridges are a bad thing.
Absolutely. No, that's guidance. I always feel that way. I never feel, even in co-opetition or competition, I feel like there's more than enough business to go around, and you never know. In our technology channel ecosystem, just be the best at what you are, and wish everyone else success, because your paths will cross again someday, and you just don't know what capacity. So that's always a good, yeah, I never burn a bridge.
Yeah.
And I'm probably the worst role model for my children, because, every parent teaches your child not to talk to strangers. And I always tell them, well, a stranger's just a friend you haven't met yet. So I love making
Right.
new friends and
Right.
building new relationships. And I encourage that in a lot of ways too, because I think that there's a lot of deep, rich relationships that we can build in our ecosystem that can really help all boats rise evenly. So there's a lot of potential opportunity there. Great, great answers. So here's my question. A lot of times people have somebody that influences or guides them in their journey in their life, a mentor, a sponsor, a champion, a board of advisors. There's a lot of names that go along with these roles. Who would you say are your three greatest mentors in your life, and what did they teach you?
So the easy answer, or number one, clear in a way, is my father. He had to reinvent himself many times. I've mentioned reinvention a couple of times. I think that's critical to always keep sort of that growth trajectory in mind. But he had to reinvent his professional career. From He ran a janitorial services business in San Francisco early in my life. Then he was later on, he was CEO of a tech manufacturing company. Now he's somewhat retired, and he's teaching skiing up at Mount Bachelor in Oregon. So, along the way, did uh, some work with orphans in Africa and different things over later stage in his life. So I mean, he's been a great role model for me, knowing that where you are at any given time is not where you end, right? So it's keeping an eye on making sure that you're passionate about whatever you're doing, and that's more important than whatever it perceived successes, or what the financial reward is, because your results are going to be much higher if you're passionate about what you're doing. So that's critical, and what I've learned from him. Um, if I were to say number two and number three, I've taken small pieces of influence from so many different places across my life, professionally and others, that I'd be hard pressed to put it to two people. But I can go back, if you said, okay, I mean, I just mentioned that my first boss said there's always business tomorrow, and his mentality is still something that I think about today, about how he approached a sales process. I had a VP probably 6 or 7 years later from that, that would say, you either have to have he would talk about PowerPoint and Excel. PowerPoint's your story, Excel are your numbers, right? If your numbers are great, you don't really have to have a good story. If your numbers are not good, you better have a really good story. So so there's things that I would take from that. My first CEO that I worked for, he basically had everybody up through sort of the receptionist. The entire organization was on a commission based. It was base plus commission. Every single person in the organization was motivated for the company's success.
Wow.
Which was, this is probably close to 20 years ago now, but that thought process, when someone would walk into his office and say they're performing well, they want more money, say it's easy, just sell more. That's how you make more money. So taking those, pieces of it along the way, more than sort of holistic from one person. There's just so many influences, and I'd say, keep eyes open to them. My coaches, my college baseball coach was a huge influence in my life. When he was, the mantra, two main things, control the controllables. And if you can't control it, you can't worry about it. And take a relaxed intensity. We talk about relaxed intensity. You can't get too sort of fired up. You need to be intense, but with a mindset that allows for you to be successful. And what I take from that is, it's really important to focus on the process. When you're when you're asking what I would tell my 21-year-old self, right? When you look at any job description, it'll say results oriented, results
Uh-huh.
oriented, results oriented. I have no control of the actual result, or very little control of the actual result. I have phenomenal amount of control of the process, right? If I can make sure that my process is correct to most often give me the outcome that I want, I need to be extremely focused and passionate about that process. And that's sort of where I've taken, all of those pieces along the way is now my mind is process oriented. I don't Results will take care of themselves. And that's the key, right? You can't just throw a quota or a revenue number or something on the wall and just look at that every day and say that's what I'm doing, because there's so much more that goes into it. You need to focus on the process.
Oh, those are such good gems, Jess. I love all of those. You've given us so many nuggets of wisdom. We're going to thank all your mentors for their guidance as well. So, I'm very passionate about women and diversity and technology. And I know I had the pleasure of working with Ingram for 8 years while I was at Cisco, being their global lead. So I've spent a lot of time in Santa Ana and Buffalo in the winter. Always a delight. And I'm just curious from your perspective, your company is very innovative, it's very forward thinking, it's very inclusive. Why is it that you and your company are passionate about women and diversity in technology?
I think where we are as a society, where we are as a technology industry right now, the times of sort of a person, from the top, having a strategy and a direction, and the rest of the organization or society, just moving in that direction is not really how it works anymore. It is our business and our society. There's collaboration because of the flow and of information, the connectivity of people on social media, on different mediums, in order to transfer ideas across organizations, across ecosystems, across societies. It is just so critical that you're taking inputs from as diverse a set of voices as possible. Otherwise, you're missing an opportunity to stay ahead, right? Every organization has the ability to extract information from, an infinite number of resources. So if it's too focused on sort of, one a voice or one small set of voices, there's just missed opportunity. So that's why we've done it fantastically well, I think. I mean, there's always room to improve, but across Ingram and CloudBlue, we're very globally distributed. We have a very diverse team, and I think that adds to sort of our forward thinking. And we're always taking feedback from the market, from our customers, from the different members of the team, to guide the direction of the company. And I think that collaborative approach is critical. And in order to have the right level of collaboration, you've got to have a very diverse set of voices.
I love that. I think that's fantastic. And you really do. You set the high benchmark for success, and I respect and admire that tremendously. And this is another question, but I was extremely moved by your father's journey. And when you shared that he helped orphanages in Africa, I was wondering, are there any causes philanthropically that are near and dear to your heart, that you volunteer or participate in? I feel like that's such good mentorship as a father to a child.
Yeah, I think so. For me, it's all around children and giving back to where I can. I think that there are a lot of underserved children in the community, and those that have resources and have time and are able to give mentorship back to them, to give resource back to them, to enable them to succeed, I think is critically important. We have opportunities in Orange County quite a bit, so that's where I put my resource. But certainly, I think any number of causes, right? Giving back in general, giving back to people that have helped you before, giving back to those in need. I think it's just super important for everyone to donate, a percentage of their time in order to give back to the community.
I love that. Yeah, I always feel even just as good, if not better, giving as I do receiving. So I think it's one of the best things, and I try to instill that in my children as well. The highlight of my walk the other day, and I'll share this briefly, but one of my children, my 5-year-old, said, "That house is for sale. I want to buy it," and I thought she just wanted to live down the block from us, and her response was, "No, I want to have a home for all the homeless people so they know that somebody loves them and cares." And I was like, if I do nothing else right in the world, like if that I raise this child to have that sort of openness and willingness to give back, then that's winning, I will say. So
Yeah,
hopefully it keeps that regard in the future to all of them.
yeah.
Uh,
There's therapy in it for yourself, right? That giving is critical. Going back to mentorship, one of my first a baseball coach that I had, pre-college, give back. He would say every day you've got to give back, and you've got to give back in different ways, and give back a lot, and that's how you grow.
I love that. So you been traveling? I know California is locked down. If you're able to travel or started traveling, where are you going next?
I have not traveled. Oh, I've not traveled for work. Ingram, it's starting to open up. I haven't. I had a trip canceled in March of last year. I was headed to Barcelona. That canceled. I've traveled a couple of times personally since, but it has been very toned down. Coming from a time where I'd be flying around, almost weekly for the most part. It's been quite a change, but I would say where I'm going next, this will be a bit of a different answer, but what I miss is, and I didn't miss it at the time. What I miss is getting on the airplane, putting my phone in airplane mode,
Uh-huh.
and just sort of disconnecting for a period of time. Or, I mean, not necessarily disconnecting. I could go through, backlog of email, but I had nothing new coming in, no new inputs, unless I was welcoming them in, which has been one of the biggest things around COVID.
Mm.
There's a perceived availability of everyone because we're all at our desk all the time, right? So when the phone rings, you answer it. It's a
Phone
constant
hand.
work cycle. Um, so I think that's what I would miss, which I never missed before. Is just sitting down in that seat, put the phone in airplane mode, and land somewhere else. I'll take I'll take anything personally. A trip to Hawaii wouldn't be bad, but that's sort of a generic answer. But the airplane flight of everyone knowing for a number of hours that I'm not available, it would be interesting.
That's a great, you really hit the nail on the head. I think that was the largest complaint for a lot of our clients as well, is that they felt that there was no off, that just the perceived expectation you were always on. And yeah, that was definitely for balance, as we said, and for those buckets, we really have to realign and just say, we're here, but now I need mental health time, or I need self-care time, because then you come back more rejuvenated, more refreshed, more empowered to give more to your employees, your customers, your team, etc. So, yeah, I always use the quote from the airline: if the oxygen mask falls down, you have to put it on yourself before you can help anyone else. So we all have to remember to put some oxygen on ourselves from time to time, especially me.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, if our audience wanted to contact you, how could they find you? What's the best way to reach out?
Best way to find me is on LinkedIn. My profile is readily present on LinkedIn. I actually I've got a goal for second half of 21, which is to build sort of my uh, online presence in different social media. I've probably neglected that a bit over the last several years. Maybe not neglected, but haven't put as much energy into it as I would like. So I expect that to be growing over the course of the next 6 months, but LinkedIn would be the best way.
I love that. And especially during the pandemic, we talk a lot about LinkedIn's not the place that resumes go to die anymore. It's a very active 725 million business professionals and future customers waiting to hear from you. So it's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now the other question I'm going to ask, and I'm going to ask you two final buzz round questions. The last
Okay.
one is what's next? Because you're here and I know you have goals and plans. So I'm super curious. What's next on your goals and plans for the future?
So the next for goals and plans is to see what new normal looks like and get back to it for me. I think it's interesting. We just started going back into the office a couple of weeks ago in California, but it's a very sparse crew in the office. I probably only saw 5 or 6 people when I was there last week. So what's next is getting the team back together, getting those conversations that we were talking about earlier that are those candid conversations where whether it's in the bar after an event or over coffee, and getting that collaboration, the informal collaboration going.
Mm.
I'm excited for. Those are the conversations that I missed that are just more, more.
Genuine.
Yeah, exactly. More genuine, less sort of, predispositions to a certain outcome.
Mm.
So that's, for me, that's key. And there's there's a mental health in that too, and, getting the team, reconnected, personally to each other. That's what I'm super excited for. And with that, the business will take care of itself.
Absolutely. And here's my final question to you. If we could switch roles and you can jump into my shoes, what would you ask yourself that I missed?
So the question, maybe it is one of the same questions, but I'll give you a different answer. I think coming off the back of like what I'd tell 21-year-old self, or my maybe all along the way, I would say that one of the most important things you can do is just take control and own sort of your personal brand, right?
Mm.
When you're starting your career, and maybe that's my summary to sort of all of the different areas that I've gone in this conversation, is that if you can own sort of, who you are, how you're perceived, both professionally in the market, when you have those failures with previous companies, that you're still seen as a valuable entity, both to them and others, because we're going to get reconnected, to give back, just making sure, and like when I said that I'm looking to build sort of my online or social presence over the coming months, all of that feeds into personal brand and making sure that you have control of it. It's not someone else's to build for you. You have to control sort of that narrative, that the what others think. Perception becomes law, right? So you have to own what that perception is. So what the question is, I'm not sure, but maybe it's a second answer to what I was told, early career self, but I still tell it to myself today. So it's it's one that I look at.
I love that so much, Jess. You know what? You are the author of your own story. There's no one better to tell it to than you. And you've done a fantastic job telling your story and inspiring us all today. I'm so delighted to have you as a guest. And thank you so much for your time and your sharing with all of us.
Thanks, Michelle. It was really fun to be here. I enjoyed the conversation.
Awesome. Everyone go out, connect with Jess. He needs to double, if not triple his network. And he is so amazing. So we're all just going to be friends with him. And I hope you guys all go out and don't be scared to fail forward and live. Take care.